and YouTube, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button on YouTube if you like the show. It's all powered by First NorCal Credit Union, and you can download the free Odyssey app by scanning the QR code in the bottom right corner of our Twitch and YouTube streams with your smartphone. Everything we do can be found on Twitch and YouTube. Again, twitch.tv/957thegame and youtube.com/957thegame. Dibs, we're talking through the latest development in the Brandon Aiyuk saga. And I think saga is the appropriate word because this literally began like 2 days after the Super Bowl when the 49ers were conducting their end-of-season pressers and their end-of-season interviews, their exit interviews, and Brandon Aiyuk was caught by members of the media outside his locker inside of Niners HQ in Santa Clara, essentially kind of emotional, not quite in tears, but clearly frustrated, asking if he would like to be a Niner in the future. And he said, if that's the right choice, then yeah. And then members of his camp take to social media and say this might be the last time they ever step foot in Santa Clara and in Levi Stadium ever again. And the situation has devolved from there. And here we are, August 13th, still answering the same question. Is Aiyuk going to be a 49er or not? It's been about a 6-month drama story since then.
Right. It's been unnecessary, too. I mean, they could have just signed him back in March for $26 million and been done with it. But he didn't want that. And whatever happened back in March never bore fruit and it never got done. And so from then, it was other contracts that came in and his price probably changed and the team didn't move and he requested a trade and all the rest of it. Everything that we know has gone on. And yet here we are at the final step on the ladder. It's either you take what we offered or you give us the okay and we trade you to Pittsburgh. It feels like we've finally reached the last step on the journey where it's either, you know, it's like I said earlier on the crossover, it's Schmidt or get off the pot. Either you want to be a Niner and you take what we offered because we're done negotiating. We're done with the back and forth. You want, you know, I had 32 from New England. We're offering you 26 or 28, 26. No, it's 26. If that's the number, here's our offer. It's on the table. It's printed. We've signed it. You can either sign it or not sign it. And if you don't sign it, then you're getting traded. And that's it. Because we finally have a trade offer, a trade partner that we are okay with. And if Aiyuk is okay with their compensation, and it seems like according to the Ian Rappaport report, he is okay with that part of it, then make a decision. It's up to you, kid.
Yeah. 888-957-9570. The 49ers have reportedly come to an agreement with the Steelers on what their compensation would be from Pittsburgh in a Brandon Aiyuk deal. And the Steelers are, quote, in a good place on an Aiyuk contract, sources tell Ian Rappaport. But no deal has been consummated just yet. Why? Why is that? And where do you think this goes from here? 888-957-9570. We will go out to the phones in just a second. Mike, I see you. Hang on for 1 minute. Before we do begin here, just want to run past you exactly what Ian Rappaport did say. And instead of me reading, let's hear from Mr. Rappaport himself. Rap Sheet on his own personal YouTube page, by the way, summed up his report from earlier today. Here's Ian Rappaport.
Here's where it all stands, as things have gotten a little bit spicy. Sources say the Steelers and the 49ers have agreed to terms on a trade. They have agreed to compensation, and the Steelers are in a good place on Brandon Aiyuk's contract. That does not mean the trade is done. It does not mean the trade is done. It simply means if the 49ers say yes, then it is done. That part has not happened yet, but the deal is in place. Meanwhile, the 49ers have made an offer for Brandon Aiyuk to keep him there on a long-term extension. He has not accepted that yet. The fact that he has not accepted that yet means it is simply not enough, and the 49ers are not there yet. So there are now dual paths for the 49ers. There's the potential trade with the Steelers, then there's the potential contract extension with Brandon Aiyuk. Neither thing is done. That is why we are in absolute limbo for Brandon Aiyuk.
So that's Ian Rappaport. Essentially, if the 49ers give the final confirmation to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the trade is done and Brandon Aiyuk is a Pittsburgh Steeler, and he would then most likely sign around a $28 million per year extension, multi-year extension, to be a Pittsburgh Steeler for the foreseeable future. My question then, Dibs, is, well, if the Niners have agreed to the trade, Why haven't they said yes yet? They've agreed to the parameters of the trade, but they haven't finalized it yet. What are they waiting on?
They're waiting on Brandon Aiyuk to go to Pittsburgh and say, yes, I will sign that contract extension. Whatever that number is, maybe they're going to Pittsburgh and trying to negotiate for a little bit more guaranteed or a little bit more guaranteed at signing, or maybe Brandon Aiyuk really doesn't want to go out and be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And, that's kind of what you're saying is, you make these demands and you do all these things trying to get the Niners to budge. And then when they don't budge, then ultimately you have to come home. And it reminds me a little bit of my sister. Shout out Hurricane Gale. And the year was 1978. And my sister would, and I love my sister, but she would run away from home. And she would say, that's it. I'm running away from home. And she'd run away from home. And the first time she ran away from home, it was like, oh my God. And I remember being in my room and crying my eyes out like, Gail's gone. My sister's gone. She's run away from home. And then dinner time comes and Gail comes back and we have dinner and it's like, okay, wow. And then, 2 weeks later,
I'm running away from home.
I'm running away from home. And she runs away from home and I cried, but a little bit less. And then dinner time comes and she comes back home. And then the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time. And I don't even remember how many times, but when she would run away from home, it became almost family comedy because, yes, you're going to
see you in a couple hours.
Exactly. Yeah. See you soon and all the rest of it. And that's kind of where Brandon Aiyuk is where, I want to be traded. Okay. We have a trade to New England. No. We're shopping you to Cleveland. No. We have a deal done with Pittsburgh. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Maybe. And if you say no to this one, then you know what? You come home like my sister, the great Hurricane Gale. She didn't sign for $26 million. She got, meatballs and rice, which is probably on the table that night. And that's it. And you go to bed and that's what you get. And that's kind of where Brandon is, where if you come home now after one last chance, we tried to give you what you want. And if you say no to Pittsburgh, I'm not going to sign. Well, then you either play for 14.1 or you take the 26 allegedly that we have on the table and we move forward. And that's what happened with my sister. She eventually lived with us.
Stopped running away from home.
Yes.
Every couple of weeks.
Even though I kind of encouraged her to try one more time,
You wouldn't be a brother if you didn't
Seriously,
do that.
I think Buffalo wants you. Try the Rams.
And then Hurricane Gale was like, no,
exactly.
Not Buffalo.
Totally.
Please, not Buffalo.
So that's kind of where we are, I think. So this is it. Like, we've called your bluff time and time and time again. This is your last chance to, all right, you want to go to a new family? Go to a new family. We found you a bed, and you can go there, and you can be a part of Pittsburgh. It's
this is the third bed we found you.
Right,
And in your estimation, the best bed.
Yes, the one you wanted the most.
And if you say no to this bed, then we know you don't want to be anywhere but right here.
Exactly.
So at least, I think the 49ers' motivation, I think pretty clearly they don't want to trade Aiyuk, but maybe above that, Dibs, they just want a resolution one way or the other.
Right. And I think that's why we got to this point now on this day, because you've got another game coming up with New Orleans and then the Raider game's right after that. And then after the Raider game, it's like, okay, football, real football, regular season football. Who is our X receiver? Is it Brandon Aiyuk? Well, we want it to be, but if you don't want to be here, then it'll be Pearsall, Conley, Jennings, Taylor. I mean, what are we doing? We're going to have to figure out.
Robbie Chosen.
Right. Somebody's going to live in Gail's room. If Gail moves out, we're going to have somebody fill that room because, we've got an extra bedroom, and that's kind of where we are.
Yep. All right. 888-957-9570. What's your read on this Aiyuk situation? Do you think he actually wants to be traded to Pittsburgh, or is this all just a big game on his side to try to get the Niners to potentially up their offer? It seems like the Niners have called what they think is Aiyuk's bluff, but is it actually a bluff? We're going to find out soon enough. What do you guys think? 888-957-9570. Up next is Mike in Hayward. Mike, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs. It's Grandi in for Willard, so Dibs and Grandi with you. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How you guys doing?
We're doing all right, Mike. What do you got?
Okay, so this is the question I got. Every year you guys talk about how much these guys should get paid, right? Contracts, right? Well, this is what I don't understand. Everybody knows that the NFL don't pay their players nothing. Nothing. According to the NBA, they don't get paid at all. Those owners don't pay anybody any money. They've been getting away with murder for years, making tons of money. So a guy wants some more money. And everybody's telling them, well, take it or go somewhere else. Oh, really? Well, you got to go somewhere else. But the issue is, why don't you guys talk about how these guys are not getting paid? They don't pay them. It's never discussed. It's almost like, are you guys working for the team? Or you guys are what's going on? Nobody defends that. Even the NFL Association players don't defend it. They just take what they get. Running backs don't get paid nearly nothing. Quarterbacks certain people get money. Who they face to get the money. It's not evenly distributed, and they don't make any money. So $26 million ain't nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, appreciate the call, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, it would be almost 100% raise on what he's already contracted to make this year from 14.1 to 26 if he had to play for 26. So, yes, it's more than not nothing. I know what you're saying, Mike, and I appreciate your point, and you're right relative to baseball where Blake Snell's getting $32 million and he's got a player option for next year that he can just pick up and he can come out and he could show up to camp again late and he could be terrible in April, May, and June again.
And he's probably only going to make like 20 starts this year.
Right. And you could go to the NBA where you've got Andrew Wiggins making 23 or 25 and he doesn't have to even try. He doesn't have to be very good and he still gets paid. So, Mike, your point is well taken, but I won't ever come on the radio and say these guys aren't making money. And yes, Brandon Aiyuk deserves to make more than what he's making, and he deserves to get a good long-term deal. And I do think that the Niners are offering him a long-term deal that may not be as much as he wants or maybe not as much as he, quote, deserves, but it's not like the team is completely freezing him out and saying, oh, no, you're going to play on your fifth-year option. I think they've tried in good faith to give him an extension.
Yeah, and it's one thing, like the team is worth what, like $6 billion? Like it from one angle, you can totally understand the athletes, and I think it's very specific to football, considering it's by far the most violent sport, at least of basketball, baseball, and football. And it's the sport where contracts, generally speaking, are not guaranteed. A big portion of these deals are not guaranteed. It's why, if you're the parent of a young athletic kid, maybe you encourage them to get into basketball or baseball, because football, first of all, your career is much shorter, high likelihood of injuries, and those contracts aren't guaranteed. Go elsewhere and you might be able to make more money and not have to put your body on the line every single day you go out there and play. But also the Niners are just dealing with the rules that the NFL is governed by. You have a salary cap you got to deal with. I know you can be creative and work around it just a little bit, but if the 49ers did not have the pressures of the rules that are governing the league, they'd probably be more than willing to offer Brandon Aiyuk $28 or $30 million a year. But the reality is they've got to try their best and be as creative as they possibly can to fit everybody in. And in a perfect world, could we all boycott the NFL and fight for guaranteed contracts for everybody and up the salary cap? That might not be a good thing for some smaller teams that are unwilling to spend, but in a perfect world, would that be something that's possible? Sure, but we're dealing in reality, not in a perfect world, and this is the reality the Niners are currently dealing with.
Yes, and it's salary capped, and you've got a quarterback who's going to make 50, 55, 60, whatever he's going to make based on what he does this year, and so you don't really have a ton of money to give to everyone, and ultimately you have an offense that doesn't pass the ball as much as other offenses. You threw it 32nd most in the NFL last year, which is dead last. And I do think that that's partially by design. Kyle Shanahan always talks about being a 50-50 split, run and pass. And that's about what they were last year. They ran it actually a little bit more than they passed it. And if you're a good team, a team that's winning games, you're going to run it more in the late part of a game than you are going to pass it. If you've got a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, you want to run it. And you've got a great running attack. And you've got an elite Hall of Fame offensive lineman, and you've got great receivers and a tight end who blocks. So you're going to want to run it. And so that does decrease your reliance on having a receiver like Brandon Aiyuk. All these things added up. They're still giving him an offer that I think is maybe not fair market. That is kind of in the eye of the beholder, but it definitely is an increase from what he's making this year. And if he doesn't want to play for 26 here and he wants to go to Pittsburgh and make a little bit more, then I don't hold that against him. Go out there and make all the money you can. Like you said, Grandy, this is a sport that it will take your career in a heartbeat. Like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's gone.
This very well could be the final major contract he signs. You hope not. And you certainly hope for his sake and for everyone's sake that they keep getting more contracts. But there is a reality where this is the last lucrative multi-year deal he signs. And when I say last, it's also the first post-rookie, which you can't really negotiate much about. So like this might be his only option, which is why you completely understand Aiyuk's side of this. And you encourage him. And if you don't encourage him to try to fight for everything that he can possibly get, then I think maybe you got to check your priorities. But you encourage him to try to get everything that he possibly can. But at the same time, that doesn't just mean the 49ers should bend to whatever Brandon Aiyuk's will is, because you have so many other factors to try to consider. Now the ball is simply in Aiyuk's court, and he has to decide, Dibs, what is most valuable to him. Is going to Pittsburgh potentially for an extra $2 million a year, right? $28 million versus $26 million. Is that worth potentially the decrease in wins that the team is going to accrue? Is it worth the lesser stats potentially? Being on fewer nationally televised games, being less nationally relevant potentially, and who knows, maybe the Steelers are going to surprise everybody and be a great team this year. But that's what Aiyuk has to be factoring in. How much is that extra $2 million or whatever the amount ends up being between the Steeler contract offer and the Niner contract offer? How much is that worth it to you, Aiyuk? Is it worth potentially not winning a Super Bowl? No guarantee you'll get it here, but you certainly have a better chance of getting it here than in Pittsburgh.
And it depends on what your priorities are as a player. And, every player is going to have different priorities. And yes, you'd love to win. You'd love to win a Super Bowl, and you'll have that forever in your back pocket. But at the same time, you might be in a spot in your mid-20s where you want to get every last dollar you can, knowing what we talked about, that this game is not only fickle, but it could be fleeting based on injury. So if you're Aiyuk and maybe the amount of guarantee between the Pittsburgh offer and the Niner offer is $10 million in actual guaranteed at signing, well, that's a lot of money. $10 million of actual money. Forget the average annual value and forget the guaranteed at signing. The real number is the actual guaranteed at signing, not the total guarantee. I misspoke, but the guaranteed at signing. Yeah. That's the money you get when the ink is dry on the contract and you hand it over. You get that money, whether it's $30 million, Amon-Ra St. Brown, or what Justin Jefferson got, which was, I think, $88 million guaranteed at signing. That is what you get when you sign the contract. So if I'm in Brandon Aiyuk's spot, that's the number that I'm most worried about. And yes, if I'm more worried about money than I am about winning, then that becomes a bigger issue to me than it would have been for other players. It just depends on what you prioritize, because if you're a Niner or a Steeler, obviously you have a better chance to win the Super Bowl this year with the Niners. Mm-hmm. And you have a better quarterback, and you've got a better everything. You've got a better play caller and all the rest of it. And maybe your relationship with Mike Tomlin's better than Kyle Shanahan. I don't know that. But money aside, if your number one priority is winning, well, then it's an easy choice. And then this would have been signed a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think.
But it hasn't been signed. I mean, I think ultimately what's going to happen, Dibs, and we can lock in our predictions now if you want. I think ultimately what's going to happen is Brandon Aiyuk will return to the 49ers and he will sign whatever their offer is, around $26 million per year, because I think everything that he's done this offseason, everything, and I mean from going on TikTok and posting his video conversation with Jaden Daniels, the new quarterback of the Commanders, to officially requesting a trade, to having TJ Houshmandzadeh come on with you and Mark Willard last week and fight for his side of this negotiation. Everything that the Aiyuk camp has done this offseason has been with one thing in mind. And that one thing has just been squeeze as much money as you possibly can out of the 49ers, because nowhere in my right mind would I ever want to leave here. This is a footballer's dream. So in my opinion, lock it in. Brandon Aiyuk is going to sign a major contract extension with the 49ers. Everything else has just been his camp's effort to try to get a couple $1 million extra out of the Niners, so he feels like he didn't leave any money on the table.
Yeah, that would be, I guess, surprising to me, because I've said all along that I thought he'd be traded, and might have been yesterday or even last week where I basically capitulated. It was a capitulation sensation where I all but said that, I was wrong. Looks like he's not going to get traded. Looks like he'll be here after all. Cha-ching! I got it, Carter. Don't worry about that. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. But maybe turns out I'll be right if he does get traded, because this report today, it caught me by surprise the idea that, the Niners have made their last best offer, and they've also kept working. And if you take the report as fact, they've kept working to try to trade him, and they actually have come to terms with Pittsburgh on a trade that would work with the 49ers. And so now it's up to Aiyuk to either take Pittsburgh's money or take our money. And our money, it's probably the same contract we offered you months ago.
This is kind of teetering on the edge of being kind of disastrous for the 49ers, though. Let's pretend here for a second that the 49ers think Aiyuk is bluffing, and by doing what they're doing, agreeing in principle to a trade with the Steelers, and then handing the racket over to Brandon Aiyuk for his approval and for him to make a decision, you're essentially calling his bluff. If Aiyuk then turns over pocket kings, and the 49ers are left realizing, he actually did want to go to Pittsburgh, and then you're left getting back a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and a reserved offensive lineman, then if you're the 49ers, you are looking at a team that suddenly doesn't have as good of a chance to win the Super Bowl this coming year.
49ers in shambles.
The 49ers are in shambles. Shout out Matt Steinmetz. If that is what happens, then I think the 49ers, rightly so, deserve to be criticized heavily for the way this offseason has played off. But they're in the middle of, pushing all their chips in the middle of the table, making a big call in the World Series of Poker. If they get it right, they're going to be champions. If they get it wrong, they're off the table entirely.
It depends on who they get back. And I threw out the name Isaac Seumalo, who's a guard for Pittsburgh. If he's a guy who comes back, he's making $8 million a year. He's a guy you could immediately put in your starting lineup, and your O-line would get better. Your receiver spot maybe gets worse, but that's going to be the case no matter what. And so you might just look at this trade as a way to shore up other spots on your team, hoping that you can get by with Jennings and Cowing and Pearsall when he's healthy and Trent Taylor. And you might think that you have the answer inside the building at wide receiver to at least assimilate Brandon Aiyuk while also getting better at other spots and getting a couple of picks. It's a tough sell, but if it works, then all of you are going to have to go back and apologize to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch.
Mm-hmm. You're playing with fire, though. I mean, half your receiving core is injured, and some of those injured guys that are supposedly going to be making up for Aiyuk's absence are also rookies, and you don't know what the hell you got with those guys. And you're looking at a season where you have a legitimate, really good shot to win the Super Bowl. You're probably going to be Super Bowl favorites if Aiyuk is on this roster again going into this 2024 season. And you're staring down the barrel of the gun on a potentially $60 million contract per year contract for your quarterback kicking in not this season but next. And you're willing to play this risky with your all-pro wide receiver. And if he ultimately calling his bluff and he goes to Pittsburgh and you're left with a reserve lineman and a couple of picks, that's a disaster. And the Niners might not be able to recover from that. And I know Steiny is thinking, a couple years down the road. I could not care less about a couple of years down the road. It's almost like the Warriors conversation, Dibs. I don't care about 3 years from now. I care about this coming season because we've got a great player on this roster right now. The Niners have 5, 6, 7 great players on this roster right now. Who knows what the team is going to look like 2, 3, 4 years from now?
Right, but maybe you can withstand the loss of one of those great players if you feel like you have a replacement in-house, whether he was one who was drafted or somebody else you already have, and you can plug them in and you can have the step back not be a full step, but maybe a half step, and you get better in another spot. Then you can, sell that to your own organization. And the fans are never going to be happy if you acquire a guard, as I have intimated they might, if that's the player you get, and a second-round pick, and a future fifth, and then you send out Brandon Aiyuk, a fantasy football player, somebody we all know, but you plug in a guard, and your interior offensive line gets better, fans are going to be outraged, but it actually might make your team a little bit better.
Maybe.
It's possible.
We'll see. All right, we got to hit a break. 888-957-9570. You're also going to want to stick around because you got to hear what Diana Rossini reported earlier today. Diana Rossini of The Athletic. I think this is a major part of how this negotiation is working out behind the scenes. What does Aiyuk really want? Diana Rossini has a hint. So stick around for that as Willard and Dibs continues. It's Dan Dibley, Mark Grandi with you in for Mark Willard. We got more coming up on the other side. We're presented by Fremont Bank, celebrating 60 years of full-service banking with no compromises. More coming up next on 95.7 The Game.